Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. Hope you all had a great weekend. And for everyone out there celebrating Mother's Day, hope you had a great Mother's Day. Went fast, right? So thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about talent search and EOC. First of all, I wanted to ask if anyone had any questions. I've got also with me Teresa Thompson-Pickney. She's here to look at chat, answer questions. Also, we have Donna. There's Teresa and Leah online. They're going to be sending you some information in the chat again, just in case if you don't have the link to the Google Drive. It was in the Zoom invitations and reminders, things like that. Also, if you a link to our webpage, if you guys want any other or our YouTube channel that has all our videos since we've been meeting every Monday. And in fact, we're going to extend this because now, since I think this will be due in September, we're going to extend our Lunch and Learns throughout the summer. So I know it might have only said until July. So we're going to extend these. So that YouTube channel, I guess we'll have a playlist of things we're talking about. Great. Thanks for the link to the Google Drive. And also we'll give you a link to where you can check out our YouTube channel of videos and other resources. We're also going to send you a link if you're interested in purchasing any of our which are not an allowable cost, unfortunately, are for both EOC and Talent Search. We have over 10 hours, I believe, of a grant writing workshop that you can purchase and then view as you need to go along. If you want to break it up, since if you couldn't attend the 2-day session that we have. What else do we have going on? Well, Q&A, any Q&A? We have some chat messages. I think, yeah, that's us chatting. Because if y'all don't have any questions, maybe I can get some questions going by bringing up part of the data collection that should be happening. And a lot of similarities between, initially, between EOC and Talent Search at the very beginning. Teresa, I don't know if you mind pulling up on your end the EOC application. Y'all, it is here in the Google Drive. If you go to the drive, and then if you're with EOC, then you open that up and you should see there that it's called the instructions, which is really the program application, just in case we have any questions, or we'll toggle back and forth between that, because right now we're in the process of trying to finalize our data collection. Okay. So if you're not in the process of finalizing it, you definitely should be in the process of initiating it and getting it going. So maybe if we go through some of the questions, that'll trigger in the application, that'll trigger some of y'all's, questions coming up. We also have here the, let's see here, some data resource lists, a timeline as well. And then for Talent Search, the 2021 program application is also there, which I have open, Teresa. So if you can have the EOC one open, then we can toggle between the two of us as we go over some of the data that should be collected for the needs section. But with anything, please pop up and ask any of your questions as we go along. Okay, I don't see any questions right now. Remember, put them in the Q&A. Do we have Q&A set up, Donna? I don't see this. Someone asked, hi, I'm sure I missed this. Is the Q&A there? Okay. Because I don't see access to. Y'all let me know if there's a question there. Someone's asking, I'm sure I missed this, but are the instructions the same every cycle? Not necessarily. The only thing we can do is we have to assume what we did the last time. That's the latest information we have. So everything that I'm talking to you about right now, everything besides the CPPs, because those are going to change. I know that for a fact. I'm assuming that everything is going to be the same, okay, as the 2021. So start working off of the 2021 instructions here for both EOC and Talent Search. Act like it's the latest one, okay? Don't wait until the final one comes out, because we definitely want to go ahead and start already. We should be in the process of it being not only starting, but in the middle. Go by these instructions. So everything I'm stating is based off of 2021. I doubt, very much so, I doubt that they're going to have time to change any of the questions. I could be wrong, but I'm more right than wrong, which I like to say. So we're basing it as though this is, not going to change. All right. Sometimes it does change, sometimes it doesn't. Typically, until there's major like reauthorization, that may change. And we've had some major things happen, so maybe it could change. But I'm going to go ahead and start collecting data because if anything, I may have too much data, which is better than not having enough. Okay, but don't wait. Don't wait, because when that RFP drops or that program application drops, we could have as little as maybe 30 to 45 days at the most. Okay, the longer they wait, you know, the shorter time frame. So by the time the final 2026 application comes out, you should be using it just to fine tune, just to double check all the questions that are in the 2026 version against what you've been working on, which is the 2021, which we'll do. I'll tell you exactly, that's the first thing we do. We also check the questions, we check the objective wording, because that is the thing that could change. The wording of the objectives could change as long as they still stick to a persistence objective. And for, EOC, they still stick to, an objective dealing with people completing a financial aid form. They can't change the objective overall title, but they could change the wording and the timing of it. So that's the other second thing we double check. And of course, we double check to see how much money we can ask for. That'll be finally official. And then the CPPs. So you're not starting the writing by the time the final RFP comes out or the program application. You're finalizing. So to start writing, you start writing off the 2021 application. Okay. So let's talk about that application. Let me go ahead and bring it up. And let me see if I'm sharing this. I should be sharing. Okay. So I call it RFP because kind of old school there, but really it's an application for grants under the talent search program here. Okay. And EOC has one. It tells you, this was FY 2021. So I'm going to act like it's the real deal. So I'm going to go, if anything, for some of you out there that are writing for the first time, go ahead and start reading this calmly, digest some of it. Some of it's, turning in stuff. I would tell you you can look to see what the CPPs were the last time around for both EOC and talent search, but just to kind of get an idea of what they look like, but don't expect them at all to be the same. Okay. There's a lot of talk, speculation about what they may be. We think because of the executive order dealing with making sure that AI is taught at the secondary school level, that possibly the CPPs would be around AI, at least one of them, and another one about parental involvement, because that's another one of the executive orders that mentioned that. And so anyway, there's a lot of language in both the EOC and talent search RFP or program application talking about submission, registering early. So I do think that it's a good time to look at that right now and make sure that, if you had to submit, who's the person who needs to be the certifying official, who does electronic submission, find out on your campus, if they're registered. You don't want to find out at the last minute. Okay, so that's a little bit of housekeeping that you can do ahead of time and now rather than later. I think we have a question here. Gear Up target schools and areas have a low income free reduced percentage for grant eligibility. Does Talent Search or TRIO have the same requirements, or is it based on national, state, regional needs in comparison? Great question. Teresa, I don't know if you want to respond to this. You're our Gear Up expert. Gear Up does it a little bit differently than Talent Search or EOC does when it comes to eligibility with low income free reduced lunch list.
Yeah, so with Gear Up, that's correct. It's based on the school's information, and you would get some type of certifying information, and those are your target schools, for eligibility for a Gear Up project. However, for Trio, um, basically let me think. It is different for Trio because you are doing a comparison of national, state, and or regional. So you would triangulate three ways, but ultimately you're trying to your target schools for Trio would be those schools that have the what is it? It's not what is it? Give me a second. You caught me off guard for a second,
Okay, I'm
Lisa.
sorry. It's Teresa's right. Gear Up, you have to certify and turn in official, and I believe there's a minimum that you must reach, but not with Talent Search Upward Bound. It is on the comparison. As long as you can show that your target schools have more students that are eligible for free or reduced lunch than a comparison to the district or state or national or all three, then that shows need, but there's no cutoff for grant eligibility. Correct, Teresa?
That's correct. That's correct.
So it's who you compare. So this is why you need to go ahead and hurry up and start comparing yourself to, other entities, so to speak. It's a big comparison game right now. So that's why I wanted to kind of, remind you all. I guess my thing is not to stress you out, but in a nice way, motivate you instead of stress you, but motivate you to start collecting this data now for the previous school year. I know we're still technically, a lot of us in 24, 25. So think about, 23, 24, right? 23, 24 school year for EOC, and I mean, for Talent Search and for EOC, whatever your target area is, whatever is the latest available census data for that target area, and within that target area, all the different things that you would be looking for in EOC on educational, on employment levels, educational levels, whatever is the latest available data from the census for your target area as compared to the county, the state, whatever your comparison area is, find out what is the latest available for the comparison data area, because it'll be very rare if they're all exactly the same, right? That they have the same source in the same year, because locally for your target area, you may be able to get maybe more recent data than national. So they might be on different timelines, but as long as if it's the latest available data for that comparison area, that's what you want to make sure to state in all your tables. Okay. So I'm taking it over here to Talent Search real quick, because I believe Upward Bound, I'm getting them all mixed up today. EOC also has this, right, Teresa, about the high number or percentage of low income families in the target area for EOC, but Talent Search takes it another route here. Talent Search includes an OR. So that's a saving grace. So maybe you're in an area that doesn't show this initially for Talent Search, like, oh no, I'm not showing that. Well, it happens where maybe you don't show a need with the high number percentage of low income families in the target area, but then you can go here where it's an or and try to get your 4 points to show, well, although, I wouldn't bring it up, but I would stress that, look at how our target schools, at each school, it's a higher rate than compared to something else. And again, I want to stress that for both, for definitely Talent Search and EOC. Well, Talent Search has more deals with target schools, but each individual target school should show, in this case, that they have more students that are eligible for free and reduced lunch, each target school, as compared to the district, as compared to state or national. If you can compare it to all those three entities, great, but it doesn't usually work out that way. I would hope for a platinum answer that Talent Search, you're able to show a need in both parts of this question. Even though it says or and not and, it is a stronger response if your target area does show that they have more low-income families, a higher percentage than compared to this county or the state or the national rate. Right. And also it kind of makes sense, right? If you show such a high percentage of low-income families, that you would also have a high percentage of students attending the target schools that qualify or eligible for free or reduced lunch. Teresa, we were talking about this with Gear Up, how some schools nowadays automatically say, well, once we hit a certain percentage with the actual number, we just go ahead and say the whole school is 100% eligible. And that can be the case, and that might actually be an added advantage here where you could say 100, all the students, because they have such a high percentage of individual applications or whatever, have whatever definition they've determined, you could say everyone is eligible. So wouldn't that be a stronger case, Teresa? Because I know we were talking about that with how Gear Up sometimes goes ahead and does that automatic, well, once we hit something, everyone's eligible, so it's 100%.
Yes, that's right. And usually it's certified through the federal government. And what it's saying is the word was socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and showing that all the students at the school get free and reduced lunch. So it's some type of federal certification for all the kids to get free and reduced lunch. So there is a way to build that into your proposal.
Right, and so it would be a strength, actually. People say, well, what do I do now? They say 100%. Hey, that's great. And again, I only say that's great because we're in this strange kind of conversation here where what should be, oh, isn't that terrible that everyone there is, when you write for these grants and have to show need, you're excited when you have more people, more students in need of something. So just make sure you don't think I'm completely negative. They say you love negative stuff. I said, well, I have to show the need. So that to me, when 100% of the school is eligible for free and reduced lunch, I'm like, great, that's going to
Mhm.
make more need here. I
Definitely.
know, right? Crazy, but that's what it is because we got to compare it to something else as well. All right, so please go ahead and again, your number one question, and then EOC, the same thing, Teresa, right? It's a high number or high percentage of low income families residing in the target area. Please start pulling that data today, okay, for your existing target area and compare it to the state, either county, state, or national rates. If you're not showing at least, and this is the same thing for talent search, my rule of thumb is the more the gap between, where your area, your target area has a higher percentage than compared to something else to show the need. The higher the gap is, the better showing need. But at the very minimum, my rule of thumb is it's got to be at least 5 percentage points difference. So if the target area is at, saying that, 20% of, the low income families are residing in the target area or low income 20%, then I'm hoping the comparison to any other entity to show that there's need is that we're at, 20%. Oh, look, the state's at only 15, and that's to me my cutoff. See, they're at 15, we're at 20. So I'm okay with that. I wish it was a little bit more where we could say, oh no, look, we're at 30%, which is double the state rate of low income families. Isn't that horrible? But you see, if I'm getting 15% for the state and my target area is only at 18 or 17%, that's not a very good buffer, right? It's not that 5 percentage point difference. So I'm a little concerned. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're not showing a difference. Well, what is the national rate? Well, it's, they're at, like, I'm just making this up, y'all. They're at 15% too, and we're at 15%. There's no need, according to that. So, I've got to worry about that. I said, you know what? Our target area may be too big, or maybe not too big, but maybe instead of the whole county, or even for us in Dallas and Fort Worth, the whole city, um, I'm not serving the whole city, right? No, you're not serving all parts of all three counties, are you? Well, no, just the areas around the target schools or certain metro, certain areas where there's cities. Well, now maybe you need to tweak or look at your target area in both Talent Search and EOC to see, do I shrink it down or do I actually just use those areas or cities within the counties or neighborhoods within the city that we're serving and pull the census just for those, and then I can actually show the true high number of low income families for both Talent Search and EOC. That is, first question is a great question because the rest of your data then needs to be answered for that new definition of what your target area is. So the first thing is to make sure if you want to keep the same target area, fine. Get the data for both EOC and Talent Search today and see how those numbers look. If you're still showing at least a 5 percentage point difference where you all have more low-income families and more students on free or reduced lunch than compared to something else, then fine, stay with the same target area. I mean, it's going off on the right foot. But already with question number one, just don't pull the data and not look at it. Look at it. If there's not that much gap between your target area and comparison to state or national rates, then you got to go back literally to the map and start thinking about, okay, where, are we really all over this target area, or are we looking at areas, sub areas within the target area so that we can actually show the need? Okay, and then that changes how you look and collect data for the rest of the census questions, and also for, you may have to, depending on your new map area of what your target area is geographically, your map area, that may be a talent search, maybe exclude a target school because it's no longer in the target area. Maybe not. So that's why you need to start this right away. It's not gonna, it's not going to something that you could do overnight or in a weekend. The rest of the proposal, plan of operation, quality of personnel, evaluation plan, those, and even the budget, you could crank out at the last minute. I don't want you to, but that's something that you could work internally on. Even be working on those now, so to speak. At the same time, it's taking you a while to wrap up this data, okay? But the needs section and the applicant and community support for both talent search and EOC are the most time consuming, and they're the sections that will require, someone else, getting data, going back and forth for the needs section, making sure that we're showing need all across the board. And then with the applicant and community support section is seeing if these partners are going to come back, and also getting those letters of commitment that do not go in with the proposal, but you should state, if you want to get full points, that you have a letter on file right now, meaning by the time you submit that you've got these letters of commitment. Okay, so that's something you can't, do at the last minute, and you are, you know, you're basically, at someone else's, or data collection, someone else from the outside. You can't do it internally, right? We have a question here. I found that using census tract data for the census tracts that a school official has told me that the campus enrollment primarily comes from. This might be needed because in rapidly gentrifying areas, they skew the income so much that showing need is difficult. Are there any concerns about doing it this way? Not at all. No, this is right to use, I think, Ray, do you think that that's been helpful for you when they've told you the census tracts? Also there's a couple of websites where, they show you the school boundaries. But usually, yeah, get from the target school and find out where the students are coming from, or from the school district. And that's what we had to do in Fort Worth, Ray. It was similar to what you have to do in Dallas. As long as you can show and keep records of what areas you say your target area. And Ray, we said that we serve the north side, the south side, and the east side of inner city Fort Worth. And we would look to see where our target schools were and where most of the students were coming from. Most of them, some of them go across town because they pick their high schools. But we would look at those areas. I don't think there's any concerns about that. But as long as you can show the need and where you got the need, and if you base it off of where the target schools are located, that should be correct. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I don't see any concerns with that. In fact, that's probably what you might have to do both at the city, the big city level, and also in the rural areas. Some of y'all tell me, well, we're working in 3 counties. And I'm like, you're really not serving all 3 counties completely from, every single street, right? Every single neighborhood. Oh, no. Just around the target schools. I said, okay, so that's probably a city. So maybe your one target area is made up of 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 or 8, cities within these 3 counties. You can explain it that way. We work with a series of 8 cities. Don't even have to talk about the county. 8 cities across this much of a boundary, this much geographical location that consists of 3 counties, but we're only serving 6 or 8 cities within that, and the data collected for the target area will be for that one target area consisting of data from the 6 or 8 cities, which includes, 12 target schools. Okay, so you should do that. Yes, that's what we need to do, especially, for example, at Thomas Jefferson High School, the official enrollment boundary includes, yes. So you should go with what a target school, your counselor, your target school says, look, this is where the students are really coming from. We have that issue. We used to have it in Fort Worth for Arlington Heights High School. So, included a very affluent area. So what we had to do is look to see where most of the free and reduced lunch students were living on the other side, literally, of the railroad track. And we would say that was our target area because those were the students that we were targeting but from the program, right? So that's how we justified it. Okay. Otherwise, that school or those students at that school would lose out because, through no fault of their own, big high school, but more than half the students were coming from the other side of the tracks. Okay. So anyway, you see where that impact, your target area is a big deal. You can't have a last minute discussion about it. You want to stay the same? Fine. Get the data for question number 1 and see if you're still showing a need the way it's always been before. Okay, great. Move forward and hope that you continue to show need when there's, because that's the other thing you have to worry about in talent searches. Okay, we have enough low-income low-income families and students. Yay. Well, that's just the first question in talent search. You've got 5 other questions, and all the rest of the 5 questions deal primarily with academic deficiencies. So here again, here's negative Lisa hoping for, okay, I hope we still show that the schools are doing worse than the district or the state or the national rate and every single school. And this is where we may lose some schools, even though they're in the target area, we may lose some target schools if they're not continuing to show need. And that's where I have to kind of be the bad guy and tell some of our clients, you're going to have to break up with that target school you've had because they're not showing a need. In fact, they're showing that they're doing better for the state in 4 out of the 5 tables. So you got to break up with them, meaning that they can no longer be an official target school unless you're willing to take a hit in 3 or 4 questions, because a reader's going to say, that one high school is doing better than the state. They don't show a need, so I can't give you full points. That's how they're going to be looking. That's why you have to list all your individual high schools. Most of the, and your middle schools when it's appropriate, but we're talking about the graduation objective, the graduation with rigorous objective, the college enrollment objective. They're looking at, high schools. And so if you don't show the need or if they're doing better, then you might have to tell them, you know what, you're not going to be one of our target schools anymore in the grant, but we can still serve y'all because you're still in the target area. So they just don't get mentioned, but they're still in the target area. So you don't have to break up with them completely, but you run a risk of losing points if you insist on keeping them. And hopefully you just have a few of them. And hopefully you have enough target schools so that if you have to leave off a couple of schools, it's not going to hurt your prior experience points. Right? So that's where we get into the other tables here of data that need to be collected. And this you should have in an Excel spreadsheet right now, a table that's set up, maybe, get the table from your old proposal, and copy and paste it and start updating it. Or worst case scenario, get your old needs section from the 2021 proposal, copy and paste just the needs section for both EOC and talent search, create a new document that's called 2026 based on 2021 formatting, and start updating everything there with new information. And hopefully you keep the same target area, the same, or the same target schools, but you may have to make modifications to survive moving forward. Okay, but that might be one way. And then maybe the source that you used last time, if you were good about leaving yourself some breadcrumbs enough so that you could find your way back to where you got the data, maybe you can start there and just pull up the updated information. Or maybe you have another folder where you kept all the separate tables and, just data collection so that when it comes time to write again, you don't have to start completely over. Or maybe you're, an existing program, but you're a new person, you can't find all that information, then as long as you have the old proposal, you could use that as a starting point. But update everything, update every single line. That's why sometimes I tell people, you know what, why don't you just start over completely? It might be a little easier. So let's see here. We have for my current, it was written that we serve EOC, I'm looking at the chat. For my current EOC grant, it was written that we serve local high school. We don't have a talent search nearby. Would we get a letter of support from the high schools where would, yes. So if they still don't have an EOC talent search in the area, you want to double check because it's been 5 years. I guess you would know, right? So if you know they don't have one for sure, you need to go ahead and get a letter from the or MOU, whatever they require. Right now, it just says letter of commitment. If you can get by with a letter of commitment from the target school principal, great. That's how we used to do it old school. Lately, the principals have been saying, I'd love to give you a letter, or sometimes they say, I can't even talk to you until you submit it with our superintendent. And it has to be an MOU, it has to go to the school board meeting. So that's another reason why the applicant and community support, and I thank you for bringing this up, can't be written overnight, because that section is because depending on what your target schools require, you may have a long process that might have to go through the superintendent's office and might have to be an MOU. In this Google Drive here, there's a letter of commitments for both Talent Search and EOC, sample letters of commitment and sample MOUs that you might want to check out, but find out what they require. Like I said, if the target school principal says, no problem, give me a letter, I'll sign it. Great, get that. But for a lot of us, they're like, oh no, we can't do that. We've got to go ahead and get an MOU. So this is referring to a question that we got in the chat. And for those of you, make sure you put in the Q&A, but if you go ahead and put the chat, make sure if you want to share it with everybody, go ahead and send it to everyone. But anyway, so yeah, that's what you want to find out, if what they require. Retention rates, yes, that's another issue. So we're coming up to this next question here. This is the biggest deal, y'all. Here, this question number 2. Low rates of high school persistence among individuals. You know why we have that, right? Because that's your first objective. We have an objective in Talent Search about the number of students that persist. And this is really, gives you, credit for working with 6th through 11th graders, because it's about your non-seniors, right? So anybody who's not a senior, which some of us are working with 9th through 11th graders, some of us are 6th through 11th graders. We have an objective, our persistence objective, as the percentage of those non-seniors from one year to the next. They get, they stay in school, but they also get promoted to the next grade level, right? One of the biggest issues for all of us, Ray, yes, is that the high school, and again, this is also, you got to plug in your, what says high school persistence. So I see where you just count the high school students, but, they're promoting everybody, and if they do promote, thank you, Teresa, she's also responding to this. They say, well, we just promote them. We can't tell about credits or anything like that, or everyone gets promoted, especially after COVID, things like that. So what we've been talking about doing is, adding another, how should we say, another layer of rigor to that persistence. Because if you just run it the way it is, it's going to show 98%, 96%. It's going to show super, super high. So a couple of things that we're talking about doing is asking them at the target schools, well, what about students that persist at a certain grade point average? Like a 2.5 or 2.75. Okay. They don't define high school persistence in the regulations. Okay, they just say that they went on to the next grade level, but what if we're forced to kind of add in another layer? Well, not just, at any GPA, but what if we say at a 2.75 GPA? Especially if they tell us, well, we're not tracking credits. But my first thing would be, well, can you confirm that what percentage of these students had enough credits to go on to the next grade level? Can a high school counselor tell you that? Can you cite that according to that lead high school counselor that this percentage at each school has enough credits, you know, when they get promoted, but have enough credits to go to the next grade level, or with a certain GPA. Because if you don't add that additional layer and put it in your table, you could put definition of persistence, students that had enough credits to go on to the next grade level, or students that had a certain GPA. If you don't add on another barrier to that, you're not going to show need. And so the question is, do you just go ahead and put the 98, 98, whatever? And also remember, this is going to be the baseline for your objective. So if you end up, when you add up all your target schools, ridiculous high persistence rates, and you're number one in the 90s, a reader automatically can take up a point saying, everybody's in the 90s, that's not a need. But I'm telling them the next sentence that, oh, the average was 96, and notice that all the target schools are doing their persistence rate is lower than the state. Well, the state was at maybe 98. So I'm not getting my 5% cushion, or even if I were, the problem is I'm already in the 90s. And mentally, psychologically, to a reader, anything in the 90s, even if you show that each target school is doing worse than the state or the nation, and the average is worse, you're still in the 90s. So I'm not feeling it, right? And this is worth two points. I could say, I'll give you 1 point. But my nightmare isn't over, because now my baseline for that objective is probably a 96% to start with. So when I go to the objective section, even if I say 100% of our kids are going to go on to the next grade level, I could still lose a point because it was only from 96 to 100. They're like, I'm not feeling a need, so I'm going to probably take 2 points in the objective section. So now I've possibly lost 3 points. So this is what we call like a Hail Mary, where we add in that extra layer and say, you know, that's the persistence that we're going to count. And the definition is that we're adding on a GPA or credits, which should be, right, credits, to go on to the next grade level. Because you have to be very specific. Tell students who came back. It's students who came back at the next grade level. Be very, very clear about that. Okay, because the way the target schools may report, like all the schools to the state, it may be just plain regular persistence and not at the next grade level. So we're actually trying to get a more accurate response to show the need. But if you go ahead and just keep it super high, you know, I'm going to lose at least 3, possibly 4 points. But if I go ahead and do this Hail Mary and throw in credits or throw in the GPA, I might bring it down to a reasonable rate, you know, in the 80s, you know. And then also, though, when I go ahead and do my objectives, I can then start at a reasonable place. But this is where you have to, what's the word I'm looking for? Give something up. When it comes time to answer your objective on the APR, you should technically use the same definition. So if you use this definition to get funded and show need, then you should use that definition once a year when it comes time to answer that question on persistence and, you know, coming back at the next grade level. You should base it off of the number of credits. You should base it off of the GPA that you utilized. Okay, that's only fair, right? We have a target school that shows need but has low talent search enrollment this grant cycle. Is it appropriate to remove that school and not replace it in the grant? Great question. Okay, well, run the numbers. Now, number one, how many target schools do you have? And you just can't break up with a target school because they're not giving you numbers of students to serve. Because if you only have 3 or 2 target schools, it's not as easy as breaking up with one school and adding another one. Because you want to, the regulations say you want to say substantially the same number. And substantially the same has many interpretations, but we try to not go any more, you know, for example, more than 51%. That's my ultimate, you know, like, no. So if you have 4 target schools right now, and a couple of things here, and you realize that that's target school is not loving you, but they're showing need. Again, okay, run your numbers on your spreadsheet, do a save as. What if you left them off? Because you have 4 target schools, you could lose 1 and be okay with your prior experience points, okay? Because 4 to 3 is, you know, I'm not removing 2 schools. And you may want to add another school, right, to do that, but don't add anybody who doesn't show need across the board. Don't invite someone without checking out their credentials, meaning their statistics, their data. Okay, they have to show need, because the worst thing you could do is tell someone, oh, we'd love to have you as our partner and our target school. Oh yeah, that's great, and then come back later and say, guess what? We can't use you in the grant because you don't show enough need. I know you want us here, you don't show enough need. That being said, again, I've kept on, Teresa, I kept on many, I know one target school in particular that I kept on our grant for one of our talent search grants, because they showed so much need that when I removed them, the average was not showing need anymore. So I needed them more than they needed me. Okay, you say you have a target school that shows need. You may need them to get funded. And I'm not saying use them and then ignore them. I'm saying use them, but then try again to get in there, to get enrollment. And it doesn't matter if there's low enrollment, as long as there's some enrollment. Now, if they're completely shutting you out and saying, no, you can't darken our doorstep, forget about it, then, you should go away. Okay. And you don't have to replace them. If you're going from 4 to 3 and your 3 exists, the ones you're going to keep, if they are showing that you have enough students, and enough to me is at least 3 times what you're funded for. As a reader, I look to see, oh, you're funded for 500, then you better show me you have at least 1,500 eligible students. I don't care if they're one high school or 2 high schools or at 10 target schools, as long as you show you have at least 1,500 students. If you're funded for 1,000 in talent search, then I'm thinking, oh, you better have at least 3,000 to pick from. EOC, the same thing. That's my rule of thumb. You're funded to serve 850. Well, I need to see that you have at least a pool of 3 times 850. Okay. So again, run the numbers for that target school. You may need them. Again, there's so many things when you talk about target schools. Well, how many do you have right now in the books? Number one, can you afford to lose one of them? For whatever reason, go down to one less and still not risk your prior experience points being messed with. Okay, but then run the data without them. Are you still showing need? Are you still showing you have enough students, right? You may have to use them again. And try to get them involved again. You never know. You never know. They may have new administration. You might want to keep them on there after all. On the income measure, you said that you would set a goal of showing at least 5% difference. What is your goal in the dropout rate, as they tend to show very low dropout rates similar to the district and state levels? The same thing. I'm looking for a 5 percentage point cushion difference. At the very least, I want our dropout rates or our graduation rate to be lower, at least by 5%, than any other comparison to show need. Okay, but again, I may have to say by a certain GPA, certain credits. I may have to throw something in because everyone is saying, oh, everyone graduates. Everyone, especially when you're looking at 12th grade graduation only, which is what you should be pulling this information for. So this is the third question. Low rates of students in the target school or schools who graduate high school with a regular secondary school diploma. And by the way, EOC, you will have to talk about high school graduation too in your area. So this is, you don't have a certain objective. I mean, you do have, how many students get back into high school or GED program and graduate. So you do have that as a comparison. But we're stuck in talent search where, although it asks here low rates of students who graduate from high school, they don't tell you here that it's for 12th graders only. Because when you don't realize that until you get to the objective section, where the objective reads the percentage of 12th graders that are served each year that graduate from high school. So we're forced to use a 12th grade graduation rate, not the 9th to 12th grade. I mean, you can talk about it here to get the reader thinking, oh, how sad, this is awful. But the baseline is based on 12th grade graduation. So perhaps you should say with a certain GPA, or do something to throw in some sort of extra rigorous barrier that'll cause it to drop, because otherwise you won't show a need. And it might be high in the 90s. And again, we're in the same situation with persistence. How can I show need if everything's in the 90s? And how can I show need or that my objective is ambitious yet attainable in the objective section if the baseline is 95%, even at 100%, I'm not going to get points. So again, do I add another layer to make the baseline drop to show need? But then I've got to, use that definition too when it comes time to our objectives on the APR. Okay, you can't have your cake, you can eat it too you gotta, if you use it to get funded, and again, it's a Hail Mary. So a reader could say, oh, I don't agree with that. Well, you didn't have anything to lose because if you left it alone, you wouldn't show need anyway. So this is one way to like a defense, because people say, well, what should I do? What should I do? I said, well, you better say regular school diploma, a standard number of years with a certain GPA, and throw that in under the table as the definition to show the need. Well, what if they take off points? I said, well, you were going to lose points anyway, because if you'd left it alone with the usual definition, it was already in the 98, 90, 99%, 99, and you had nothing to lose. So try to do that. Or you may decide, you know what, I'll put their definition, what it is, and just lose 4 points. I've got, 15 prior experience points. I'll lose them there. I don't like to do that. I don't like to go into a competition already saying, oh, well, it is what it is. So I'll do everything to try to save those points. Okay, so I hope, it's getting harder and harder. What is, Teresa's writing something for, what if a student is just passed on through the district, no matter what the grades? Well, see, that's the problem. You need to find out, no, that's where you can throw in either, well, let's do by GPA. Let's do 2.75, or let's do some by credits, or, sometimes you need to ask the high school counselor, okay, well, based on your professional opinion, what percentage of these students are actually getting promoted based on credits or having a certain GPA that they should have? Well, that's a different story. Well, if you were to ask me, I'd say possibly only, I don't know, maybe it's, they can give you a certain percentage. Okay, I'm gonna get out of this one here. I don't know if you can see that's trying to update something. Oh gosh. Anyway, cancel. All right, so again, it may take your target school people helping you out, allowing themselves to be quoted as what the actual rate is in regards to promotion, not promotion to the next grade level, having earned the right to be an 11th grader, not just being promoted, just to be promoted. What would be the cutoff GPA to show lack of persistence? I don't know. I just use 2.75. It would be great if you could link it to any sort of benchmark. Look to see in your state to be a certain type of school, or, I'm going to do some research for Texas because that's where we're based in, where they would say someone in some definition, oh, a student who is at this level, or just look to see what are the rules of persistence supposed to be to the next grade level. What, using their own definition, maybe they haven't used it, or maybe they're not adhering to it for whatever reason. But, I just picked 2.75 because it's not quite a 3.0, but it's a high C, so I just grabbed at that. And actually that's, I believe, upward bound is 2.5, right, Teresa? Or is it 2.75? I'm getting confused with some other things.
Upper bound is 2.5.
It's a 2.5 for upward bound, which I think is incredibly low. I know, you're probably saying, Lisa, stop that. But when you're trying to show need, for upward bound, how many students, oh, look, so many, 2.5 is low. So I just picked 2.75. Try 2.75, try 2.5, see what you get, but you're going to need to come up with something, because that's going to be the only way to show need, unfortunately. Okay. And again, cite your sources. I'm not saying to sugarcoat anything. I'm saying put your definition at the bottom. You don't go on and on about it. Don't go because the schools promote everybody no matter what. I just put under the table definition, students that persisted to the next grade, to completed their current grade level and persisted in high school at the next grade level based on GPA, based on a 2.75 or whatever GPA you decide on, okay? Or on number of credits. The same thing for graduation. EOC, where do you suggest to find data for objective 1 and an ambitious attainable objective spread? Well, a great question. Objective number 1 is that oh gosh, the non-college ready, those students that are dropouts, basically, Teresa, it's they're earning, they're getting some sort of credential. They're graduating, they either get back into high school or they graduate with a GED for objective number 1 for EOC. Right, so the data for that, you would have to try, I mean, Teresa, I'll let you speak to this, but I was thinking I gotta go to, maybe compare it to the local high school dropout rate and graduation rate or the GD centers, but I'll turn over to Teresa if she's got some ideas. That's a tough one.
Yeah, secondary school diploma or equivalent. Yeah, so that's going to basically be the high school graduation
High school or GED
or
and
yeah, or equivalent would be your GED. Um, I don't
uh,
have any creative thoughts about it, but I'm just thinking the high school um graduation percent.
so one way to try to find out, remember you're working with your adults. I try to ask the local workforce centers
Yeah,
what they would say the graduation rate is of adults there. I mean, also you can go to the census and look up for the area. They do have a table for adults without a high school diploma,
that's true.
adults
Yeah,
over the age of 25 or over. So you can use the census data for the target area. And then comparison data, you should have state and national rates. So that's where I would go. Go to the census first to find that data on what percentage of adults over the age of 25 have a high school diploma. And they break it down in several different layers, but you can also check in with your local workforce centers and GED centers as well to make it more appropriate, if you can. But census is where you go for that. Now, the second part of your question, and this is the same for EOC and talent search, the spread to make it ambitious yet attainable. My recommendation is, my gut is, and I wish, check back in with me after we get our results on the SSS competition, because we use the same philosophy on setting the gap between ambitious yet attainable for all our SSS proposals, which was the same that we used for the previous competition, which I think was Upward Bound at that time. And that was a successful, at the time, it worked. So we use that same, methodology for SSS. Once I find out, how that worked, we struck goal again, I can tell you, yes. So now we've gone through 2 competitions where our methodology of, number 1, looking at what the baseline is. So if the baseline is very low in the single digits, I don't want to go any more than 10 percentage points higher, possibly. Okay, so if it's 5%, census says that 5% of the adults, you know, have the high rate, but would be opposite, Teresa, right? So we're looking for how many students, how many adults do not have a high school diploma, right? Then, we're looking at here, how many students will get a high school diploma. So again, that's where getting from the GED centers will give you an appropriate baseline. Okay, so you brag about how many people don't, then you talk about, well, this is what it is in the target area already for these adults. So I don't want to go, if it's like only 5%, then I don't want to go any higher than 15%. Okay, any higher than that. Now, for some reason, if the baseline as to how many adults over the age of 25 get a GED or go back to school, you find that out, then I want to go ahead and, maybe I can go a little higher. But traditionally, that's been a very low baseline of adults who have dropped out of high school that go back to get a GED or high school diploma. Okay, first you want to talk about how bad it is, about how many people, compared to the state, do not have a high school diploma. Then you've got to find the opposite. And that's where you can talk to the GED centers or the workforce center to give you a better, more accurate information, so you can set your baseline off of that. So for talent search, the same thing. If it's, so we should not include high school seniors. No, exactly, Sharon. So Sharon said, we shouldn't include the high school seniors. No, because your high school seniors are considered college ready. So they should be considered in your objective dealing with what percentage of participants complete a FAFSA, what percentage complete a college application form, and then what participants enroll in college. So they're counted in that number. Okay, but you want to talk about for the first objective, you want to first start out by saying, look at the, in the target area, look at the higher percentage of high school, I'm sorry, adults over the age of 25 that do not have a high school diploma. Isn't that sad? Compared to state or national rates, you want to show that there's more of them. Then you need to, that's not the baseline though, right? Because the objective is about how many of these individuals do end up getting a high school diploma or a GED. And that's what you're trying to help them do, right? But you have to get a baseline. So that's where, and so you're ignoring your 12th graders right now, because the 12th graders come in for the second, third, and fourth objective. Okay. The first objective in EOC is talking about non-college ready participants, those that are high school dropouts or barely just started a GED program, but mainly that are high school dropouts. Okay. The second, third, and fourth objective are about college ready participants, those that have either graduated from high school, recently or a long time ago, or have, or they're in adults who are in a GED program when you met them, but they're close to graduating with a GED. So they're considered your college ready as well. It gets confusing, right? Okay, but great question, great question. Let's see if we have answered these questions, okay? So Teresa, that's a toughie because it's kind of, you have to pull data on overall what the high school graduation for adult rates is, or the dropout rate, basically. And then we have to then find the opposite to actually get the baseline.
That's right.
So it's not fun. EOC, are there sections of the application that are typically tough to answer where schools consistently have challenges? Are there tips or suggestions on how to best approach those sections? Yeah, to me, Teresa, I don't know if you agree, but with EOC, to me, is the most difficult needs section because there's not one place to go to answer all those questions. To me, the second question is the hardest. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it's dealing with the, I think you have it there pulled up, Teresa. It's the status of the target area shows a need for educational training. I believe something to that effect, or career development, something like that.
Is this the need question?
The second question, yeah, in the need section for
Okay,
EOC.
need for the project. The second question is a high number of percentage or both of individuals residing in a target area with education completion levels below the back rate level. Let me go to I think it's the
The
next one.
third question,
The
yeah.
third one, a high need on the part of residents of the target area for further education and training from programs of post-secondary education in order to meet changing employment trends.
That's to me, that one, and the next one is other socioeconomic issues and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
Those kill me. Those I would go to the thank you. Yes, we're putting some information in our chat. I would go to your workforce, to census data, to local business journals, or any kind of reporting that's been in the paper lately about the status of the economy in the target area. It can't just be general for the whole state, but it's got to be specific to your target area, depending what your target area is. And they want to know, the breakdown of what jobs. I mean, that could be a whole paper in itself, Teresa, right? I mean, trying to pull that up. I will tell you that the baseline for the majority of your objectives in EOC will probably go under the fourth question, where it asks about other academic and socioeconomic conditions. That's where I usually talk about my baseline data. But question 1 and 2, there's about how many people have a bachelor's degree, or we would say how many go to college or apply to college and go to college. That's where one of the baseline, but the majority of it is answered in the last question. But that third question is a doozy. How many points is that worth, Teresa? Is it worth 6 points?
It is worth, I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't see the
It
points.
should say it at the end of the question.
And it's in the overall 24 for the need. Are you talking about the objective points?
No,
That's
no,
what
no. I'm talking about that third question, about the one that you just read off.
no, I don't see any points associated with it.
Okay. so if we take the four, there's 4 questions in that need section, I believe,
Okay.
right?
The total amount is 24 points.
So it's, that question is about 6, it's worth, each question is about 6 points worth. If it's not, that's how they kind of break it down on the technical
Yeah,
review sheet.
it makes sense. Yeah.
And so, it's worth a big juicy 6 points. There's no objective tied in it to it necessarily, but you do have to make a case for it. So to me, that's the one that takes the longest to find out, and the most research that needs to be done locally to find out what's going on, what's the economy like, what are job openings currently, what jobs are open, what's the demand for types of employment, and what is required of those, what educational attainment is required for each one of the high demand jobs, and how many people in the target area do or do not have that. And that's where the census data would come up again. They break down the educational attainment a lot in the census. And so you need to get your target area information there and compare it to something else, some other entity to show the need. And that's sometimes where we bring up unemployment too, or underemployment. So it's kind of a potpourri. It's kind of like a bring your own drama, economic drama, to show us how, make a case for why this target area is struggling compared to another entity, compared to the nation, compared to the state, something. Okay. Thanks, Teresa, for looking that up. I appreciate that. And thank you all. We quickly ate up another hour. Again, this is being recorded. It'll be available on our YouTube channel. And if you have any other questions, please send them in. We can also cover them ahead of time and then cover them during our session. Other than that, I think we'll see you all next week. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Again.